Hello everybody and welcome back to a bonus episode on the Owen's Media Matters YouTube channel, where in this episode I have a podcast with the Press Association's Eleanor Crooks. We talked all about the world of tennis, where it's going, where it's been going over the last few years and where it's going for the future and what it means for wheelchair tennis, where it's been on the rise over the last 25 years. So enjoy this episode with Eleanor Crooks. Here it is. So we've got Eleanor Crooks here from the Press Association. Eleanor, thank you for joining me this afternoon. First of all, just on your career, really, in terms of in journalism, in the media. You've been at PA Media for obviously 20 years now. And how's your career been really covering, the sport of tennis? It's mostly your main sport, I presume, and obviously a bit of Northwest football as well.
Yeah, I know when you say 20 years, I can't quite believe it's been that long, but there we go. It has been. Yeah, I mean, it's been great, basically. It was my dream when I was a kid to do this. So I feel really lucky that I've been able to, not just get into journalism, but to cover the sport I love the most and to go around the world doing it and see all these amazing players. And obviously it has been an incredible era of tennis. So I feel really fortunate for that as well. So yeah, I mean, as with any job, sometimes it has its ups and downs. And it is, it's hard work, it's long hours. I never get any sympathy from anyone when I when I say that. But it is, and obviously, there's a lot of competition out there. But no, I mean, on the whole, I've had an absolute blast, and I hope that I can carry on for a while. The industry is changing, tennis is changing, but I think it remains a really interesting sport full of pretty interesting characters, and it seems to generate more than its fair share, I would say, of big news stories. So. Let's see what comes up.
Yeah, and you've mentioned obviously covering tournaments, around the world, and that big era really of obviously, for 20 years there was only 4 winners of Wimbledon over the big 4 really: Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, and Andy Murray. That obviously was breached a few years ago by Carlos Alcaraz. But just how in that, like you say, that era really, you couldn't have picked a better era to start your journalism career, really.
No, I couldn't. That's right. Yeah, the first time I covered Wimbledon was 2009, so we were already a little bit then into the sort of obviously Federer Nadal era, with Djokovic just coming along and Murray trying to force his way in there. So no, I mean it's been amazing. Some of the matches at the finals and semi-finals of Grand Slams between those guys, obviously seeing Andy Murray win 3 Grand Slams, which when I started covering tennis was not something that I imagined was going to happen. So that was probably the most special thing. And then obviously we've had Emma Raducanu now coming along and winning the US Open, and hopefully Jack Draper can get in among there in the years to come. So yeah, no, I mean I've timed it really well, haven't I? By absolutely obviously nothing to do with me there, but yeah, and just from a media point of view, all those guys have been great, super interesting. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, feel very lucky.
Yeah, and say, a focus as well, especially on, you've had obviously wheelchair tennis. You've seen that really come to the forefront, at times, especially over the last few years. And how inspiring has it been to see, players like, Alfie Hewitt, Gordon Reid, especially say Alfie Hewitt winning his 10th Grand Slam just recently. How incredible really is it to just see players like that almost fighting fighting the big name players just for media coverage, really.
Yeah, I mean it's great that it's grown a lot in profile. Obviously, compared to the men's and women's singles, it's still nowhere near on the same level, and there's a way to go there. But certainly in this country, what Alfie and Gordon have done has been brilliant in terms of raising the profile of wheelchair tennis. Obviously, we have had players in the past who've been successful, but certainly Alfie, what he's done on the singles court and then on the doubles court with Gordon has raised the profile. And Alfie, I don't know if you've ever spoken to, but he's a really engaging character. He's a great talker. He wears his heart on his sleeve. When you watch an Alfie Hewitt match, you never quite know what you're going to get. So I think that's exciting. And I think the Alfie and Gordon story as well, the number of doubles titles they've won, I think that's really sort of captured people's imaginations. And it's great that so many people do know who they are, have watched them. Obviously, with them doing well at Wimbledon, it's been on the BBC, and they've had that exposure, and both of them have been really vocal as well about the importance of that, and putting wheelchair tennis center stage, not shoving them on some outside court and forgetting about them. So they have really fought as well for the profile that they've got at the moment, and they absolutely deserve that. Yeah, but they would be the first to say that they're not there yet, and there is still a long way to go.
So yeah, is there more for the sport to do in terms of, to increase that media coverage? Because of course, you've seen Wimbledon over the last few years, of course, as you mentioned, taking, on the main, number one court, getting, a really prime time coverage on BBC One, and in terms of the other Grand Slams as well, getting, on TV as well. But what can the sport do really in terms of getting an equal parity in terms of media coverage?
Yeah, I mean, that is going to be really tough, obviously, for a number of reasons. The gap is wide at the moment, and although it has narrowed a little bit, I think it's hard to see a time, certainly in the near future, where it would be anything like equal. I think one really important thing, as you say, certainly putting the semi-finals on big courts, I think that's been a big development. At Wimbledon, they've had great crowds. And they've had great finals as well, which I think that's really helped. People who've tuned in will have been grabbed by these matches, and they will then look out for these players and keep watching. So I think that's a big thing. And also the fact that the draws have got bigger, I think that's a big thing as well. Because it is, if your draws are maybe only 8 people, then it is quite hard to sort of try and argue that you're on a same level as a draw of 128 people.
Yeah.
So I think the fact now we've seen those draws go up to 16 and 32 in some places, I think is great. I think that shows that there's an increasing depth there. I think, to me, that's the thing that wheelchair tennis needs to improve the most is the depth. Because while it's great to see Alfie Hewitt and Takita Oda playing each other in all these finals, like what that says a bit is that they're just a lot better than everybody else. And I mean, I suppose, as we've just said, you could argue the same about your Federers and Nadals and Djokovic's. But yeah, if people know what the result is going to be before you watch a match, then that's not great, is it, for the sort of appeal and the competitive nature of the sport. But yeah, that's all to do with funding, and if you don't get the exposure and you don't get the money into the sport, then it's hard to grow that depth. So, but to me, that's the big thing, is growing that depth, making the sport more competitive, and also, yeah, selling the personalities, selling the rivalries. Alfie was great talking in Australia about how Takito coming along has sort of made him have to be a better player. So I think the more of that, the better. And yeah, hopefully they can just sort of keep carrying on this path. And I think it's great that they have people at the top of the sport who are willing to be so vocal, who are willing to fight for that profile and earn that profile, because that is definitely what it needs.
Yeah, you raise a good point, especially when it comes to what the sport can do there. But in terms of when it comes to the media coverage side of it, that comes on the TV or in the press. I spoke to, say, Paralympian Louise Hunt just recently, and she made a really good point of where, in terms of, say, the Paralympics, for example, where, people watching on TV through no fault of their own will see a player, like you say, like Alfie Hewitt or Gordon Reid or many of us like that, and especially the female draw coming a lot more prominently now as well, and they see those players every 4 years through the cycle, and they say, oh, I remember that from Tokyo. I remember him from Tokyo. I remember him from from different Paralympics as well. Is that sort of not the TV company's fault in a way, but in terms of, is there more that they can do to really get these tournaments on more mainstream channels? And of course, for the media side of it, is there more that both sides can do to through those 4 years, they don't the players don't get forgotten about, if you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think in tennis, maybe because you've got the Grand Slams and they are such high profile events, I think it's maybe there's a bit less of that. A lot of Olympic sports, people will say the same thing, won't they? That, people think somehow that they turn up at Olympics and then do nothing for 3.5 years and then just rock up at another Olympics, So I think that is a problem with Olympic and Paralympic sports, maybe in general, is trying to maintain that profile through the rest of the cycle if you're not athletic, say, you know. So I think tennis maybe is better off with that because you have the Grand Slams and they're just growing and growing and growing in profile, and taking wheelchair tennis with them because, as I say, they have managed to elevate their profile at the slams. So, but yeah, I think, you know, we're probably guilty of this. I mean, to be honest, not just in wheelchair tennis, in tennis as well, maybe you value the slams are kind of so much up here now that everything else kind of doesn't get the same profile.
Yeah.
Retire, like nobody's going to care about tennis anymore. But I mean, that just isn't the case. And tennis, particularly on the men's side, I think has been really lucky that Carlos Alcaraz has come along and Yannick Sinner's come along, and suddenly, yes, you've lost these like amazing superstars, but you've gained people who have managed to, you know, grow their profile really quickly, have managed to establish themselves right at the top of the game, win the biggest prizes. And I think especially on the men's side, there's some really exciting, even younger players coming along. So I think the men's game is actually just fine, you know. The women's game, I mean, in some ways, actually, I think the women's game is more interesting. And it's great that you've got now sort of consistent people at the top, I think, who are, if not winning the Grand Slams all the time, then at least challenging for the Grand Slams all the time, being there in the semi-finals and the finals and things. And I think that is important because, well, it's exciting to see upsets and different people coming through. I think if you have different people winning the big titles all the time, it's fans get a bit confused and they don't really buy into it because they get excited about somebody and then they don't seem to do anything for years. And yeah, so I think that is good that there's a group now, both on the men's side and on the women's side. I think the women's side, they still need to do a better job. The WTA Tour needs to do a better job of really promoting the players and selling the players to fans and getting people to really care about these players, because I think, you know, both tennis and maybe society, it's become more about the individual, you know, and you need people to be buying into the players and the personalities of those players. So that's what the tours need to do, is to really promote those and sell those. But I mean, overall, I think tennis is in a pretty good place. You know, there's more money than ever going into the sport. The slams attract more and more people. You know, the Australian Open, was it 1.2 million people came to the Australian Open? They've done a great job. I mean, it's certainly not without its problems. Sometimes, well, a lot of the time, to be honest, tennis can seem to be working against its, you know, against itself. You've got all these different bodies within tennis, and instead of coming together for the betterment of the sport, they seem to all be fighting against one another. I think that, I mean, hopefully that's changing a little bit. Whether it really, you know, whether you'll ever get to the stage where the ATP and the WTA merge, say, I don't know. And there is an issue with the smaller tournaments. They don't make money. You know, the way that the bigger tournaments have grown has actually squashed the smaller tournaments down. So how does the sport tackle that? How does it make it a sustainable profession for more people? That's another big challenge. But overall, I mean, you know, I do think that the sort of people who were gloomy about the sport 5 years ago probably wouldn't say the same thing now.
So that was Eleanor Crooks there. She gave some brilliant insight, didn't she, into what happens at the Press Association and how covering those big four tennis players over the years has been. So, hope you've enjoyed that podcast from Owen's Media Matters, and I hope you can join us next time for some more insight into the weird and wonderful world of sports media. Goodbye.